The Prime Minister has been in Western Australia today. He held a cabinet meeting in and around Perth. This was, of course, great expense to the taxpayer, but who cares? Other people's money. They all decided to, get their own versions of Toto 1 to fly over there to pretend that they are running the country remotely from Western Australia. But there was something that went through to the keeper last night that I know some of my mates have already talked about here, but I want to put a bit of an underline here about just how nasty and just how cocky the Prime Minister is. Oh, he's a Hawks fan this month, is he? Now, he was asked this question in relation to the long and winding road to do with things like Brittany Higgins, Linda Reynolds, whether there was a great cover-up of matters that we all have talked too much about over the past couple of years. But, of course, we all remember the real political campaign was about pretending it was a Liberal Party female problem. Now, this was a question that was asked on the behalf of somebody on the other side of the country, but it was a question asked in Western Australia by somebody from the Australian newspaper.
A federal court judge and a Western Australian Supreme Court judge found claims by Brittany Higgins of a political cover-up of an alleged rape were not just false but dishonest. Linda Reynolds and Fiona Brown were wrongly accused by your own ministers. Do Penny Wong and Katie Gallagher owe both women an apology for their central role in conflating an alleged rape with a false story of a political cover-up that has damaged so many people and cost the country billions?
Sorry, he was in Melbourne. Why? You can obviously see the Victorian Premier behind him. He is in Perth tonight, though. Now, the question, detailed, all right? And often, I will tip you off to something here. When the only opportunity to ask a significant person a question is wherever they decide to turn up around the country, yes, occasionally news organisations, and I have seen this both as reporter and an observer of press conferences, every single media organisation, from the most sanctimonious over at Channel 2 to the beggingest over there at the Turnbull Times, they will, which is somebody who's working in the Canberra Bureau will ask somebody who's in Melbourne going to the Prime Minister's press conference, hey, can you ask this question for me because I want to get what their answer is. Now, two judges in two separate states, in two separate cases, have effectively said that the idea of political cover-ups all in and around the Morrison government, all in and around the much-discussed events inside the Defence Minister's office all those years ago, has been proven not to be true. Now, in fact, two judges, very clear in these comments. So the Australian has been doing some work on that. They asked that question. Watch the reaction of a very cocky Prime Minister who just dismisses a person doing their job. This is low, but unsurprising from a bloke who thinks he can do no wrong.
Well, thank you for reading that question. A judge found the issue on Brittany Higgins very different from the way that you characterise it.
Now, this is not true. Now, the reality is that any time anyone goes anywhere near any of these names, any of these words, then there's a whole bunch of lawyers that will come running and a whole bunch of people with puckered backsides at the mere conversation of this issue. But the one thing that has been very, very clear, particularly in the Reynolds case, is the concept of the political cover-up, the attempt to silence, shunk, gone, not part of the game. Yes, there have been other comments around other parts of this that have been said by other judges. I dance because I don't want to go and get dragged into a process. But I want you to know that what the Prime Minister just dismisses, firstly, as thanks for reading that question, is a smart-ass tactic. It's one, to bully the reporter and to send a message to the rest of the media, if you do that, I'll bully you too. Now, this could be considered very effective because the story is generally not reported by anyone other than the person who is reading the question. But I repeat, with my own eyes, I have seen, and I saw it during an election campaign, questions being read from phones that may well have been the wordings that have come from head office. But the Prime Minister, again, as I tell you, and as the Australian newspaper has pointed out in chapter and verse, I will save you the legal argument. Two judges, two cases, both on either side of the country come to the conclusion that the political cover-up that was much the discussion of the Mean Girls, much the discussion and guffawing and carrying on and sanctimonious huffing of the now Finance Minister and the now Foreign Affairs Minister in Senators Wong and Gallagher was garbage. It was all, of course, weaponised, and we all know, despite the lies told to the Senate about the heads up that was being given to particular Senator Gallagher, we know all of this. But the Prime Minister also knows that if he can just pretend he was asked a completely different question than the one he was asked, and he can hang shit on the person who was asking the question because it is the one he did not want to answer, then he can behave like this. Question and answer. And remember, he knows or doesn't want to know that exactly the opposite is what should have been his answer.
A federal court judge and a Western Australian Supreme Court judge found claims by Brittany Higgins of a political cover-up of an alleged rape were not just false but dishonest. Linda Reynolds and Fiona Brown were wrongly accused by your own ministers. Do Penny Wong and Katie Gallagher owe both women an apology for their central role in conflating an alleged rape with a false story of a political cover-up that has damaged so many people and cost the country millions?
Well, thank you for reading that question. A judge found the issue on Brittany Higgins very different from the way that you characterise it.
I mean, again, keep reading the Australian newspaper, keep reading the summations at skynews.com.au, because we all know the rest of the media got the result they wanted. They black-eyed and they blew away a government that they didn't like. One that, of course, won an election they weren't allowed to win, according to them, back in 2019. This is nothing to do with the central events. It is all to do with the politicisation and the games that were played around it. Two courts, two judgments of the same. And what a disgrace from the Prime Minister to belittle somebody who was, yes, asking a question potentially on somebody else's behalf. But I repeat, I have seen it, and now we're going to start to play this game. Let's watch the Prime Minister from now on in all of his press conferences, whether he points out whether the person from the ABC is reading a question for somebody else. What do you reckon the chances are? Now, I hate to burst the bubble of politicians, but they're not as famous as they think we are, as they think they are. Not a Freudian slip. But for all of us that are anywhere near the political world, the reality is there's a huge chunk of Australians who couldn't care less. There's other stuff to talk about. There's other things that are on. They're not as pumped up about it. But we know there's quite a strut that these pollies have, thinking that every single person knows about them. And whenever they go to Canberra, they are the best of the best. They are the rock stars. And I remember a poll a couple of years ago that I did smirk at when old mate Jim Chalmers used to get a little bit loose, but obviously nobody followed up on what that meant. That despite the fact that he was the treasurer of the country, 67% of people in Australia could not name the treasurer. It was early in the day, but still, I loved it. The idea that only a third could name him and two-thirds couldn't. A little reminder about how big they are very small at times. Another reminder to Australian politicians, including this time on the Liberal side of things, where in the Redbridge polling, our mate Kos Samaras, turning up in the Financial Review, interpreted in part by, again, our friend Philip Curry. People love when I say all of this, but I'll do it anyway. A little reminder here that if either of these blokes thinks that they are the automatic future for the opposition, automatically the person who can become the alternative Prime Minister, they might want to raise the profile. Because apparently 37% of people have never heard of Andrew Hastie. Now, you and I have. You and I love him, and I hope one day he's the Prime Minister. Don't confuse some of my stuff that I've said over the past few months as somebody who's not into him being a leader, the same as Angus Taylor or the same as Susan Lee, but here's the reality. When you've got about a third of the country who have never heard of you, yet 100% of it has to vote, it kind of matters. Hence why, the longer you're around, the more they know. Hence why Susan Lee, who's been around for more than 20, 25 years in Australian politics, people know who she is. We also know where the polls currently are, but still, important to know. Which is why so much of the time that I have spent on the air with you, I talk about how the media plays the game. Now, this has resulted in fewer and fewer friends from the olden years of my life. It results in many a sneer and an eye roll should I go anywhere near the approved media in Australia. But the reality is that for many people, they end up being the gatekeeper. Therefore, because these are the people who write the articles, talk on the radio, bang out the thing for the online, or, of course, make the 6 p.m. news. Many people's perceptions of politicians is read through the lens of that Praetorian Guard of people who never want to rock the boat. Hence why they treated Peter Dutton like this at the election.
Why should people vote for you when you give the air of a guy that's turned up not having turned his homework in on time?
Can you tell us how intense your fights with Barnaby are?
How can you be taken seriously in the Pacific if all of your policies alienate?
Your message to South Australian voters, particularly in Boothby and Sturt, who are watching their retirement savings be wiped away today, who are worried about you becoming Donald Trump.
Campaigns are pressure events for candidates like yourself, but they're pressure events for families of candidates too. Do you worry your dad is not being helped and might even have been harmed by the fact that he's worried about you?
Stop at all costs. Make the one you don't like seem as unelectable as possible. Intentionally create a sense of being malicious around those that you don't want to achieve power, as opposed to the one, of course, that you just carry in like they were Cleopatra.
Prime Minister, have you spoken to Premier Minns about getting the Rabbitohs into Allianz Stadium?
On those issues, though, about the polls and the momentum being on your side, are you concerned, though, about the possibility of a protest vote emerging, that people think that Labor's going to win pretty comfortably?
What does it say about your opponent, do you think, that he doesn't know the price of eggs?
We've passed the halfway point in the campaign. The polls look increasingly positive for Labor, less positive for the coalition. We must be getting confident now as we go into the final 2 weeks.
Should the Commonwealth spend anything on helping WA secure an NRL site?
First of all, what do you need toothpaste for? Do you not have
Which is why we've got to pay attention to what happened on Channel 2 last night. Susan Lee was on the 7:30 report. And there are two main ways that people interview politicians, right? The more you interrupt them, is the tougher the interview. The more you let them say what they want to say. Oh, that was incredibly soft. Now, again, playing their part in the media role of trying to send the message that this is some sort of unelectable rabble because they have got rid of net zero. They have now stepped into the unpalatable side of Australian politics. As you will have heard by now, she was not given the fairest of times. Now, again, it's a tougher place. We know it's a lefty zone. There's no giant surprise there. But honestly, I get it that she'll probably end up winning an award for this, but when the host doesn't let somebody get 2 sentences out, I think we all know what's really going on here, and it's nothing to do with the subject they are discussing. You've seen it before, but why not again?
Just explain how that works when we know that it's gas predominantly that sets the marginal price of electricity in Australia. So how is it the fault of renewables? How is it that the renewable rollout has caused...
If I can just answer the question.
Energy prices to go up in Australia.
This is how. Now, I want to give a worked example of this because I come from Western New South Wales.
I think we should just talk about the
project is well behind.
I think we should talk about the price of gas. You're still not accepting the facts about the economy of the economy of the energy system and actually how it works right now.
Totally,
you accept that it's gas.
Well, at the same time, they promise that
I think right now they're working on
well, yes, they are. But hang on,
policy to put more gas in the system, as you did at the election.
Isn't it a bit too little, too late?
Got the Australian Energy Council, the people responsible for this business in Australia, arguing against you.
With respect, Sarah, if you will let me finish. This is an important point, Sarah. Please let me finish.
Yep.
Now, again, I get it. The House style is the more you interrupt, the better the interview is. But every now and then you've got to say, OK, so what's your idea? Let them explain their idea. So here's the thing I thought about your idea. Here's the problem with you. I get all of that, right? But no. Let's compare that to how the golden boy, the handsome boy is treated.
Prime Minister, welcome to 7:30.
Good to be back in Canberra.
Well, and you're back with a huge majority. You've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually change Australia. We're currently watching the UK government squander the majority that they had. How do you avoid the trap of excessive caution?
With determination, making sure we are an ambitious government.
They were jokes. What were the jokes about?
The jokes were about all sorts of things. But once again, I'm going to keep that private. But he had showed a real sense of humour, and it was a very warm conversation.
All right, now let's get to Jess Wilson. You've heard by now she is the new leader of the Liberal Party in Victoria, a year out. Her hope is that being a first-term MP, being a person in their mid-30s, that this is all fresh, new and could be a circuit breaker for the Liberal Party being able to take on the Labor Party. Fingers crossed, I hope that's the case. Interesting chat that she had with my dear friend Peter Credlin earlier this evening.
We need to offer Victorians a wide-ranging agenda. We have to be talking about the fact that debt in this state is soaring towards $200 billion, and the opportunity cost of that means that we won't be able to fund essential services. I'm 35 years old. I'm a millennial. I know that my generation and generations before younger than me have given up on trying to buy their own home. And it's the punishing property taxes in this state that is making housing unaffordable. These are the issues we need to take to the next election. I believe I can do that. I can take that broad agenda and really sell an economic narrative and a broad narrative about why the Liberal Party will be a credible economic alternative for Victoria.
Now, reality in Victoria is that the Labor Party is the forever machine. They've been there for the best part of 30 years, meaning that no one wants to rock the boat. You know what I call the triangle of dependence? Well, when it comes to the debt, have a look at this. According to Victoria's budget and Victoria's Treasury, in 2024 it was $19 million a day. By 28-29 it will be $29 million a day, according to a freshwater poll, and asterisk because they said the Libs would win the federal election. 60% of people say they're doing a bad job. But let me show you exactly how the Labor Party is going to try to take this new Liberal threat on. It is by scaring the triangle of dependence. This, their first ad within seconds of her taking the job.
What do we know about new Liberal leader Jess Wilson? She leads the Victorian Liberals, the party whose last time in government saw them making massive cuts to health and education. And now they are promising $11.1 billion in new cuts. Last time the Liberals were in power, they cut $1 billion from health and waged war on our AMBOs. They cut $1 billion from Victorian TAFEs and closed 22 campuses. And now Wilson says the Liberals will cut again. Jess Wilson, more Liberal cuts.
See, this is their whole strategy, and this is the triangle of dependence in full display. Why? Now, despite the fact that they have sent the state broke, $20 billion debt is now $200 billion debt, because the majority of people have got their hand out for the welfare or are getting something from the government, or in an increasing number of seats, people work for the government, or in Melbourne, some of the biggest companies, the biggest customer is the government, despite the fact that they are spending more than they are making, and any attempt to pull that down, cuts. That is the politics of Labor. That is the modern problem that we are facing in Australia. Now, that is day one. It is up to the Libs to be able to call bullshit and to fight against that perception, because you only get one chance at a first impression, and they are taking one hell of a swing when it comes to somebody who's in their first term, who apparently is quite impressive. I know plenty of people who've talked her up all day today, but the reality is they are up against the most well-oiled machine in Australian politics, being the Victorian Labor Party, who are going to say that any attempt to balance the books is somehow a way of pushing people into poverty. No. The Victorian Libs, whomever their leader is, need to hammer the failures of this mob, the unfairness of this mob, the idea that before the last election 33 people died because this government ran a 000 system into the ground, that as late as this year, the 000 system is now down to pen and paper. Time for a new broom. May this be the leader who helps arrive it. All right, last one here. As you work your backside off, and many people work all day Monday and all day Tuesday. Why? To pay for, tax for the politicians, to piddle up against the wall on showbiz for ugly people. Here is how they spent your money making social media videos about themselves. First, our old mate, clueless Claire O'Neill.
This is a $5,000 apple, and 50 of them is $250,000. I've done the maths so you don't have to. Our policies will help the average young person save 8 years off the time it will take them to get into their first home.
Remember, they think everyone is dumb. We're playing right up the back of the room. We're pretending we're all on play school here. Hello, Johnny. Hello, Michelle. Do you understand our housing scheme? Here's another one, having a crack at the Libs for dropping net zero. Or another one. Remember, this is how they think Australians are interested in politics, right? That you've got to talk down to people, down to people, down to people. Patronise them by carrying on like this.
Oh, boy.
She ain't no Sabrina Carpenter.